Hello, Tina. Welcome
Hi.
to our Connect to Thrive YouTube channel.
Thank you very much, Mary. Nice to see you.
It's so nice to see you. Thank you so much for agreeing to do this. Tina and I, just for a little bit of context for those people listening, Tina and I met at a conference that we were both speaking at, I think maybe nearly 2 years ago now. And we met in the kitchen, didn't we?
Yeah.
And I just felt like a connection to you straight away. I just felt really comfortable with you. And we've sort of stayed in touch via social media ever since. And I approached you and said that we were going to be creating a YouTube channel at Connect, and we wanted people to come and share their recovery stories, didn't I?
Oh,
and
yeah.
you agreed to do it.
Yep, because it's a great thing. Anything that can give anybody hope and insight into the recovery from an eating disorder is everything I want to do. So I'm more than happy to be here today.
Thank you, Tina. Do you want to start by introducing to the people who are listening today who you are and what it is that sort of, for want of a better word, qualifies you to talk about recovery from eating disorders?
Okay. So yeah, as Mary said, my name's Tina McGuff. I'm an author of a book called Seconds to Snap. I also train in mental health first aid, and I would class myself as absolutely fully recovered. And I know that's a massive, bold statement, but it's taken me a long time, a lot of work, and a lot of determination to get here to be able to say with confidence. And that's why I do what I do now, which is lots of talks across the world, actually. Even on media, a lot of stuff in the media, in schools, universities, whatever it is, just sharing the story and everything I've learned from other people, also sharing their story. Because I think what for me is one of the most important things is everybody's journey is different, right? Every single experience of any illness actually is different. It's like if you have, on a very basic level, appendicitis, right? Everybody has the same outcome, which will be the appendix taken out, but the pain might be different, the experiences might be different, the whole operation might be different, but there's still appendicitis. It's the same when I've experienced my eating disorder. I can only talk about it from my own experience, and that will look very different to other people's and other people. So I think comparison, I know it's the thief of joy in many aspects. So please also don't always compare yourself to others. I think that's a really good thing. And another thing I like to say is this could be triggering, possibly. So just be very mindful of anybody's listening, and, you know, please just pay attention to how you feel sitting with it here. If you're not comfortable, please, you know, don't continue to watch if I say anything. Obviously, it's totally I don't mean to upset anybody or anything. I would just be talking about my own experiences. And also that there is real hope of a full recovery, or whatever recovery is for you. I know I'm fully recovered. I don't have an eating disorder. I don't have disordered eating anymore. But I'll get to that later. So I hope by the end of this, I can kind of validate that for people who are watching, and that gives me some credence with them as well. So that's my hope anyway for today.
Thank you, Tina. And what a helpful introduction. What a great way of setting it up. You're obviously very skilled at doing that, and really helpful sort of things for people to hold in mind. So do you want to start by, I'm sure you've got your own pattern, but do you want to start by telling us what you think is relevant or helpful, or really highlight the key points of your own story and your own journey through your eating disorder? Would that be okay?
Yeah, of course. So I think one of the biggest myths about an eating disorder, I had anorexia, but it's a very complex illness. It was for me, right? And I think what's interesting is people always imagine that you know why these things happen. Sometimes people think you make this happen. You have chosen to have this illness or this condition, whatever you want to label it. I had no choice over this. When I was 13, there was an event in my family, and it was a horrible, horrible thing. I'd gone to bed this night with my little sisters. As far as I was concerned, my family was a great family. I didn't notice there was any problems. I'm the eldest of 4 girls. And during the night, my neighbour, which is a man, woke me up, tapped me on the shoulder, and he was holding my little toddler sister in his hands, and my other 2 were with me in bed. And he says, Tina, get your sisters, there's been an accident. And so anyway, it turns out the house was full of police, and our lives fell apart. There'd been an incident, which I won't really go into here, but with my parents. And so mum was in jail and dad was in hospital. And our whole life kind of just unraveled, right? We descended into homelessness, absolute poverty, you know, where we had nothing. I had no food, no electric, not even, we couldn't even wash our hair. It was just dire. So we had gone from a very happy, stable, safe, what we thought was all these things in the background. However, it turns out that was all fake, and it was just awful. And this event was the kind of pinnacle of everything changing for us. So that was in the 80s, and we didn't have the internet, right? We didn't have people, I didn't know what mental illness was, eating disorders. I'd never heard of it. And for some reason, my whole behavior, of course, started to change, right? I didn't know what to do. I was basically so scared and so fractured and traumatized, but I couldn't talk to anybody. I felt this huge burden to look after my little sisters because I felt no one else was doing it. But I was too scared to ask for help in case we got taken into care separately and all these. So there was all these, I was only 13. So there was all these big, huge things in my head, and I didn't know what to do. It was really, really difficult. There was only one teacher that one day stopped me and asked me if I was okay. And of course, it's that sliding door moment. I lied, but deep down inside, all I really wanted to do to this teacher was say, please, God, can you help me? Can you take care of my sisters and I? Can you look after me and keep me safe? But I was so scared of saying anything in case mum ended up in trouble or whatever. So, because kids don't, you know, they don't understand adult thought or these things. So anyway, I eventually just went right off the rails, turned to alcohol, solvent abusing, everything I could to almost vicariously either end my own life that way or just take me out. So I was self-medicating without even realizing. And then this family, the man who originally kind of tapped me on the shoulder, he was part of this Italian family who they owned a chip shop locally, and they gave me some hours. They could see I was struggling, so they started to give me some hours in this chip shop, and they would drive to Italy every year. And when I was 15, they asked if I wanted to drive with them to Italy. They were like my second family. I would always run to them and sit with them. And so I went with them.
Can I ask who you were living with at that point? Can I just...
well, mum was, I was just with mum, my sisters, right. But she was very mentally absent, and she was trying to work to get any pennies she could to support whatever. But it was a very, very isolated, lonely existence we had. We're all, I call them, we're all feral, really. The kid, me, my sisters. No one was really looking after us. So, so yeah, I went off to Italy with this family, and I was a very fit young person at that age, right? I used to dance, I used to swim at school, I was always into gymnastics. I was a very fit. I never once looked at my body and thought, you're fat or this, or nothing, Mary, never a thought in my head, right? I didn't buy glossy mags because that was a very expensive thing. That I never looked at those or models. So I wasn't influenced by anything. No. However, this one day on this beach, I remember turning round and I thought I saw this woman, this lady who was on a sun lounger, indicate that my bum was big. Now, you'll probably understand this because I've heard a lot of things. A lot of people say they remember a trigger or like the straw that broke the camel's back. It was just one comment, and it was this one comment, and I literally had this compulsion to make myself sick. Now, I'd never done that before. I didn't know where it came from. I started that day, I ran back to the apartment. I'd had Frosties, I think, that morning, stuck my fingers down my throat. And this sudden ability to do this, to clean out and just to feel ugly and fat, and it just overwhelmed me. And I came back from that holiday, and I was in the grips of what then became anorexia, but I had no idea. So all these behaviors were all leading up to this very moment and this point and just this trigger. Now, it was like a tangible switch actually going off in my head. I still to this day remember it. And I don't know if she said it. I don't think she did it, but I don't know. Was my brain making it up? I don't know. I mean, she was in my rational mind now. I think she probably didn't, but it was just my mind making things fit, right?
Well, you saw.
And yeah. So I became very unwell, and by that Christmas, I was in hospital. I was sectioned into an adult psychiatric unit eventually. At 16, I was extremely unwell. Not eating and over exercising became my whole way of life. I didn't understand what was happening to me. I didn't know what it was. I started running to the library a lot just to figure out nutrition, because they didn't have it on the package, but I knew I had to figure out calorific values. So I started taking notes, writing down every single macronutrient. Wow. I used to pretend to be a patient at dentists and doctor surgeries as I ran down through little schemes and rip out, like, look at their magazines, rip out all the recipes, just random strange things. I was obsessing over recipes and I was sitting staring at people eating in the street if they were sitting eating, and because I couldn't even afford the food anyway. You know, I used to raid the people's bins for bottles and take them all to the chip shop at the top of the road to try and get, at some points, to try and get like even some chips for my sister. So it wasn't that I was hungry or could afford to go and buy food and things like that. It was this obsession I had over food and not being able to have it. And then it just got worse and worse and worse, as you'll probably know. And I ended up on laxatives to try and kind of get that process going. I stopped being sick because I just couldn't bear that pain and what was happening in my head and face and the teeth and my hands. And then I just eventually stopped like eating, which was awful. So yeah, I became extremely unwell, but remember, I had no one looking after me. I had no one to help me and no one to talk to. This newfound behavior.
No one noticing, hey?
I stopped going to school. I piled on clothes. My mum was always asleep and never really saw my dad. I had a relationship with a boyfriend at the time, but I stopped seeing him because I just became more and more isolated in my bedroom or wherever I could away from the world, just to hide, just to escape the eyes. And that's exactly what happened. And yeah, ultimately I ended up extremely unwell. And because of that, I think it was ingrained, the behaviors were all there. And I didn't know what the hell was going on. I ultimately started to realize I had a problem. And because I couldn't ask anybody, I went to the library and I got a book on, I just wrote, I went to the woman, asked about eating problems or something like that. And I saw this book about anorexia, and I took it home and I started reading it, and I knew immediately, I thought, that's what I have what this girl's doing. It's just awful. But yeah, that's kind of what happened in a nutshell. And then that was by the time I was 16. So yeah.
So how long had you been suffering for? How was it? It sounds like years you were suffering on your own before you had that moment where you read that book and thought, this is me.
Yeah, well, that's what I mean. So our lives had unraveled when I was 13.
Yeah.
And then although the eating disorder as such, like this sticking my finger in my throat, didn't happen until I was 15.
Yeah.
All these behaviors was clear indications that I was mentally unwell, right? But because I didn't have anybody to talk to or to help me, I just slipped through all the nets and just stayed off school and hid and got drunk and just did things, that was just awful. So it's easy to see how people can slip through those nets. And that's why it's important that people are aware of the signs and symptoms and things to try and help to mitigate that, of course. And then I think if things had been different, I remember even phoning, actually, and this is going to sound so ridiculous, but I was so desperate for help. I remember phoning an orphanage and asking if they could take me and my sisters in, because I was so scared, and I knew I couldn't keep them safe because I didn't feel safe. And they just basically said, do you have a house? Like, why are you phoning? They must have thought it was a prank call or something. And I said, yes. And they were like, don't even bother. You know, I didn't know who to ask. I eventually phoned the Samaritans at one point, and this lovely woman just really helped me, you know, helped me a lot this day. I was only young. But yeah, no one was there to say it or do anything. So I think for me, what I do, especially for young people, is to really show them how valuable and how life-changing somebody being there to listen can be.
Oh.
Literally can change and save your life, I think. Yeah, it's pretty grim.
It's really, yeah, I mean, I'm sure you will have had people respond to your story before. Yeah, I'm really feeling what you're saying. Trying to gather my thoughts, but actually what I want to say is, and what happened next?
Yeah.
So you recognize this, and then what happened?
Yeah, so I ended up obviously in hospital, and it was a mixed adult psychiatric unit. So, but
not a specialist eating disorder space.
No, it was, you know, it was back in the day, the late 90s, mid to late 90s. And I ended up in and out of there for the next 4 years until the early 90s. And it was just this revolving door of me basically learning I hate to say it like that, but playing this game, you know, right? So you learn how to, you know, although I was sectioned and I was extremely unwell, right? So they needed to medically make me well before psychologically I could be okay. And that took a long time, right? Because I was very malnourished. So once that happens, they still do this in some places, but not everybody would respond to the treatment I got. And I might not have responded to somebody else's kind of treatment, but what they did with me was they put me in a bed. I was obviously forced nasal gastric. I had a catheter in because my kidneys weren't working, all these kind of things. And they basically heavily medicated me with chlorpromazine, or thyroidazine, whatever it was that at that point that worked. And dithiapine was another antidepressant. And I wasn't allowed to move. And when I needed to like I had nothing left inside my bowel. So that was very painful. It was just awful. But I wasn't allowed to move until weight kind of started to go on. And then they put me on a program. So for example, if you put on 2 pounds, you're allowed to read for an hour. This was eventually, you know, or another reward system. And then when I started to get, you know, weight, every morning we'd get weighed on the sit-on scales, you know, the big chair with the weights along the side. God. And I would try and kind of lock my feet underneath to pull myself down. I would run it, you know, there are lots of tricks you would try and kind of garner on your own to try and squeeze on some weight. And then every time when I was allowed up, I had to go even into the toilet. The nurse would stand in the toilet with me. Like, I hated it. You can imagine, she must have hated it too, standing like with me while I'm trying to do the toilet. It was just awful. And in the bath or the shower, just because I was such a suicide risk as well as all the other risks. But when I got to a certain weight, I was allowed to go to the toilet on my own. So I used to run to this one cubicle, this one end toilet all the time. And I used to hide like a paper cup at the very bottom and things. So I used to just kind of fill up on fluids. Just there's lots of things people do, right? There's lots and lots of things people do. I won't talk about those, of course, but that's what happens. And no one told me them. These are things, because there was no one telling me these things.
Guiding you. No.
Yeah, you just knew. And then that's how my life kind of rotated. So you got to your weight, where you're allowed to walk about on your own, and you were happy there. And then, but actually the weight wasn't going up really, it was all just this fake, and then suddenly it would plummet and you couldn't control it, and then you'd be back in bed. So it was this game that you played.
Can I ask at this point, like, do you remember, what were you thinking? What were you believing about yourself, about weight and shape, about what was possible for you? What were the things that were in your head? What was your reality, and what was it like in there for you? What were you believing at that time?
I was believing that I had the most powerful friend in the whole wide world. Like this confidence that only it was almost like this whole control I had over this malnourishment, to me, was the best thing I'd ever experienced in my life. Like, it was everything to me.
That was
nothing
it.
else.
Fully.
Nothing else mattered. I became emotionally inept. I had no feelings anymore for anything, anybody. I was blunt. I thought no one cared about me, but no one was allowed to come visit me anyway. But in my head, I thought that's because people had abandoned me and just left me to kind of die, So this thought process just kind of exacerbated the other. So this vicious cycle of awful thinking. But then in amongst all of that, Mary, what I found now obviously I'm well, I can look back and I've learned, is it was all shrouded in, I had obsessional compulsive disorder. I used to obsess obviously over all these calories, and then it became plugs, and then it became all sorts of various things like that. I would think there was calories in the air, so I couldn't breathe, ridiculous things like that. I had depression. I had huge anxiety. I had obviously suicide tendencies, so all these things are all in there. Psychosis was in there. I would see things. I would hear things, but I didn't know this. I didn't know if it was, I thought it was real, and it's just, that's what's really difficult, I think, as well. Some people think, for me anyway, for anorexia, they see, oh, somebody has anorexia, therefore they must just be this person that doesn't eat food. And that's it. They're super skinny, and that's it. And no one, there's so many people that don't actually understand the huge complexities and range of that looks like for so many people and families and friends, and the amount of parents that get in touch with me and say, Christ, we tried to force this food in her at the beginning, and that my friend just says do this and do that with this food, and it's not their fault. It's just through lack of understanding.
Education, yes.
It's all about really lifting the lid and really talking openly about the condition, warts and all, because it's ugly. It's awful.
Terrifying, it sounds like a living hell. Absolute living hell for you.
It is a living hell. I call it, it's like having a monster in your head. And it was like, an auntie said to me recently, an aunt whose daughter was really unwell, niece was really unwell, she said to me, Tina, it was like she had been taken over, she was possessed, and she needed to be exorcised almost to free her from the clutches. And that's a great analogy, actually, because I remember feeling like it was like somebody had moved into my brain that was really loud and brash and bold, whereas I was quite quiet and very shy. But this was dominating. This was a dominating force. So this is why I think that's quite a good thing. And there's a program on BBC Three, series, Overshadowed. I don't know if you've seen that.
I haven't.
I think it's eight little 15, 20-minute pieces. And it's amazing at actually showing that, how that happens, that slide develops. And it's good for parents to watch too, because they can really see how their child or whoever is their loved one can go from a happy, loving, fun-loving person to this other person that develops and starts shouting and bawling and swearing and becoming aggressive, and all these behaviors start. And the reason why is the protection of your what you think is your best friend, this thing you're trying to protect at all costs because it's given you what I think was lacking, which was, I don't know, control over my scenario, something. They give me
Comfort, safety. You felt there was comfort and safety in
Yeah.
it. Yes, yeah.
Absolutely.
So, okay, so I imagine that everyone who's listening is like me, sort of on the edge of my metaphorical seat and wanting to know, so what changed then, Tina? Like what, because that is not where you are now. So can you describe for us the process of what happened where you realized your health?
Sure. So I think what's important is that obviously I talk about this and I wrote about it so that people don't get into that situation, because I think I'm one of the lucky ones to have great clinicians looking after me and really never giving up on me. And I think that's so important. So if anybody is watching and feels that what they can do, please do something, because the last thing you want is to go down that hellhole, because not everybody has that facility on their doorstep, or there's not the resources. So I think that's important. So please get help and reach out to someone. So what happened with me was, because I developed this great relationship over almost 4 years in and out with my main lead psychiatrist, literally her battling to save me mentally all the time, and the nurses around me, even though at times they must have hated me and I definitely hated them, but that's par for the course because they're trying to stop me keeping this illness going. But now I've nothing but absolute gratitude and admiration because they saved me. My God, without them, I wouldn't be here today. So I'm eternally grateful to the NHS. But it was very difficult. I'm not going to sit here and say, oh yeah, it was easy. It was the hardest thing I've ever done. When I say it took me, I talk about 3 T's a lot, which is truth, trust, and tenacity. So you really need to trust someone to tell the truth, right? And telling the truth to someone is the hardest thing, because you're laying bare your soul, right? You don't want people to know exactly what you're thinking, but you need to trust that person to do so. So when you find someone that you can do that with, that'll really make a huge difference. If someone believes in you, it can be the difference between recovery and not. So that was important. Absolutely. And then tenacity, because it takes a long time to develop these behaviors, these patterns, this starvation behavior. It's hard to do. And so to get out of that, it's like pushing that boulder up that hill, right? It really is the opposite to what, because the path of least resistance for me would have been just to like go, let it overtake me, right? That was the easiest thing for me to do, which I prayed for most days. However, team around me always made sure I didn't do that, right? Which is amazing. So it's hard to garner that motivation when you have nothing. You think your life is not worth anything. So there was this one particular day. Now, to let you understand, this is where I said earlier as not a trigger warning, but just so people are aware, I'm going to talk about where I almost took my own life. Okay, so if anybody wants to not listen,
take care of yourself, listeners. Yeah.
So when I was in this hospital, I knew every single sound of people's footsteps, their smell coming up the corridor, the way everything, their nuances, because I spent a long time just lying in a bed with only being able to listen to people come and go, right? So I knew every shift pattern, every behavior, every drug run that they did. So I knew times when I can do things, okay? And it always makes me laugh because I used to think I was I didn't think I was devious, but to protect what I wanted, which was to end my life, I knew I had to really pay attention to the nursing team when I knew they were really trying to pay attention to me, right? So anyway, I knew that between this time in the morning or this time, they would be busy handing out the sheets, they would be busy doing the drugs. I would have a quick exit out. And up from the hospital where I was, there was a chemist quite about maybe half a mile away. So I knew I had half an hour, and I was, you know, by this point, I was a normal, what they classed as my kind of target-ish weight. So I was able to go about. So I ran up this day to this chemist and bought open blades. And I ran back to my toilet, and I was dead emotionally. I didn't think about my family, my sisters. I didn't think about anything. I just knew that my life was never, ever going to be worth living. What the hell could I do? What could I offer the world? Nothing. This is what was going on in my head, right?
That was your reality.
Yeah, that was my reality. A toilet was my sanctuary. That was my reality. This grim grey toilet. I had no friends anymore. No one ever came to visit me. My parents hated each other, and their life was just in trauma. My sisters were too young, and they were all over the place, and I had let them down. So this was all in my head, right?
This is your narrative, yeah.
Yeah. I was ugly. I was worthless. I was stupid. I'd left school with nothing. Like, I hadn't been at school, had no qualifications as such. I was useless. So every day thinking that and battling this narrative was just pointless for me. I just was in so much emotional pain. I just wanted it done, right? So that's what I did. I went into this toilet this day, and I was standing there in front of this mirror, and I had the blade, and I was about to do it, and at that I heard this crying, and it was one of the patients on the ward, a lovely Irish lady, and she was crying, and she came into the toilet next to mine, and for some reason her tears, her emotions hit me like a ton of bricks again in my face of, oh my God, if I do this now, like, she'll maybe find, like, this will affect her. This will impact her recovery and her ability to live a life. And she's such a nice woman. And I felt guilt. I felt empathy immediately for this woman. I didn't want to impact on her in any way.
You felt some connection with her.
I did. She was a lovely woman, this woman. And she used to talk to me all the time. So that guilt hit me. And then it suddenly hit me, Christ, if I do this, is this my legacy to my siblings? Like, are they gonna, this is what they're gonna be told today. You know, your sister has ended her life in a toilet, and then it all suddenly hit me, and I got really, really angry. I got really, really angry, and I started to feel all these emotions. Anyway, I eventually just slashed through my own arm in anger. I couldn't do it. I couldn't go through with that. Anyway, I passed out outside. I left the toilet and passed out, and I came to, and I was very heavily medicated, as you can imagine. And the psychiatrist who'd been looking after me for a long time was there, and she said, and I said to her, what the heck, like, will I ever be okay? Will I ever be okay? Because I just can't bear the thought that this is going to be my life forevermore. And she said to me, Tina, I promise you have to trust me. One day you will look back on this and you will not believe that this is you, like, this is your life. I promise you. And honestly, it's like, I can only describe this one grain of sand of hope in a desert. Like, I clung on to her words.
Absolutely.
So much. And
thank God for her, hey? Thank God for her seeing your health.
Because without her, I had to trust her, because she'd got me to that point, whether I reluctantly or not, but she had trusted that process in her. So, and she was so right. And a few days after that, I remember thinking, Christ, surely there's kids out there having a great life, you know, this shouldn't be a life for a young woman. This shouldn't be what if I ever get through this one day in the future, I'll maybe tell someone about this so no one has to do it. So that was always kind of parked at the back of my head. So it was things like that, right? It was that little thing.
Future thought, yeah.
Future thought. And the more of that happened, the more I had to kind of almost rewire your brain, I suppose, in thinking a much more positive way. And then when I eventually got discharged in my early 20s, I got put to a rehab unit where I spent a lot of time because I didn't have really anywhere to go. So I had to kind of relearn who I was, what was my purpose. So I went back to the library, started reading a lot of books, right? A lot of books. I just read and read and
About
read.
what? What were you reading about?
So it could be anything from Jung to anything, any self-help, the art of motorcycle maintenance, all these things. I just started reading anything that was psychological, self-help. But when I came across Maslow's hierarchy of needs in his books, it just all made sense. Like, it was like my brain fired up with all this information. It all made sense. I thought, God, this is why I've been unwell, because this was not there and that wasn't there and that. So it all made sense. And the more I read and understood, the more it helped me daily. It helped me learn and learn and learn. So that kind of built up my confidence. And that's how I really started to recover, was really understanding my own thought processes and building up that knowledge every single day of just learning who I was and doing things. So I then, this is just another add-on, a big add-on actually. I didn't know what to do career-wise, right? I was no education, just out of a psychiatric unit, not much options. So anyway, my gran took me to there's a big naval base in Scotland called Rosyth. So she took me there one Sunday, and there was a massive aircraft carrier, and there was a Harrier jump jet on it doing its display. And I said to my gran, I want to be a jump jet pilot. Like, I want to be a pilot. I mean, so anyway, Monday, I walked into the RAF careers office in my local town, walked in, said, hi, I'd like to join the RAF as a pilot. Thank you very much. Let's go. And you can imagine, I was laughed out the door. For one, there was no women in the RAF. And two, I didn't even have a maths bloody degree or a qualification, never mind anything else. And they would never have let me in anyway. Your history of psychiatry, unfortunately, was a big negative for them. So I thought, you know what, screw you. And at this point, my dad had a little business and it was doing okay. So I started to work with him, and I was earning a little bit of money then. So I joined the Territorial Army because I thought that's the closest thing I'm going to get to the military. I'll work my way up. So joined that. I ended up loving every second of that. It helped my confidence no end. Learning about weaponry, exercise in a safe environment, doing all these things was fantastic. I got a loan, I got my private pilot's license. So honestly, I started doing all these things, and every time I did these things, it was like
pilot.
Yeah, so it was like a confidence booster, right? It was just like, Christ, how did I do this? This is impossible. Tina,
what I want to know is billions of things. I really would love it if we could just ditch our plan for an hour's talk and talk for the rest of the day, if that's okay. Because I've got so much to say and so much to ask you. But one of my things is, so what was happening to all those thoughts that you described before around, low self, I'm not worth it, and weight and shape being such a huge thing, and your best friend? Like, what was happening there?
It was,
at this point,
it was still running alongside, but I had control over it as in a positive way. It's like I took one of those huge lights that you see at the front of a truck and shone it onto positive outcomes, right? So instead of being negative, I thought, you know what? I can actually do really structured good things instead of that negative behavior. So that's why I started, like, I would run up Monroe Hills here on a Sunday, right? They're big hills. So I would, instead of running around the city trying to, be fit and exercise, keep that going, I would do something, have a goal. So I would get to the top of this hill and I would be like, wow, nature is beautiful, right? Reconnect back to nature. And then I would just go home and I would have my tea, and I would know what was in it. I would feel happy about it. I would feel happy within myself with being in nature. So that was a positive thing. When I joined the Territorial Army, I met new people. They didn't know my past. I didn't tell anybody. So they just accepted me for who I was, you know, and they seemed to get on with me. So having new friends gave me huge confidence. Winning at things, like beating them at something, you know, beating the guys at whatever it was. We did a race and stripping rifles and things. I won. I ended up winning the top awards. And all these things, they were so positive outcomes that the rewards I was getting from positive outcomes like that was so much more good for me, my mental health, than anything else. You know, that the negative stuff, it was all about now really focusing and keeping that flash, that light on that, and really paying attention. But Mary, don't get me wrong, like it went downhill. It did actually go wrong because I wasn't interested in boyfriends or anything like that. A lot of my illness was regression. It turned out I was trying to regress to be a childlike, you know. When I had anorexia, I didn't want to be looked at sexually. I didn't, you know, I was escaping all that male gaze and things. So when I braced my got my boobs back and things like that, my period came back and I started to get attention from men, I would kind of struggle a lot with that.
I think a lot of people will relate to that.
Yes. And I hid, a lot of that was hidden. I used to want to strap my body up just to not be in that way, you know. But anyway, so I was working very hard. I used to work a lot just because I found it extremely rewarding. And as I say, it was just this confidence building, right? It made me feel like, you know what, I can actually do this. I've come from that. I can do this. And I had to talk to myself every day this way. You can do this, Tina. It was like I was rewiring all the time. The more I focused on the positives, the more positives seemed to happen, which is great. And then this guy walked in the business one day. It was a bar we owned in a nightclub. And I fell in love at first sight with my now husband, too. We've been together all this time. And we've been married now 25 years this year. So it's been great. But so Jock walked in, and that was it. And he and I have been together ever since. But during that time, so even though everything seemed great, I wasn't in therapy, I wasn't on medication, I was in love, things seemed to be going great. I became really unwell with psychosis. And it just came out of the blue again. It just, these words kept coming in, these behaviors and thoughts, and I started to lose weight. And it wasn't because I was suffering with an anorexia behavior. I couldn't eat because I was so anxious. I wasn't hungry anymore. I was really scared. I felt really nervous all the time. Bright light of all sorts seems to flood my eyes. I couldn't cope. There was lots of other things that were happening. But anyway, it got out of control one day. My sister lived in this property and she stayed on the top floor. And I went up this day and I sat down and I had this feeling that I had like a bungee cord wrapped around my waist, and it was going to ping me out the window to my death. And that's literally what was about to happen. And I was holding on to the chair. I didn't want this to happen. It was like it was going to do it to me, this invisible bungee. And so I was so scared because I didn't want to go out the window. So I quickly ran out the flat, like I was grabbing on the walls and everything. I ran downstairs, got in my car, and I drove myself to the psychiatric hospital. And I ran in and I just said, look, I don't know what's happening to my head. Please help me. Am I going insane? I don't know. This is my name, my date of birth. I've been in here before, blah, blah, blah. And anyway, I eventually got some medication and I was out for a couple of days. And when I came to, I just felt so strange. And it turned out I had a huge psychotic episode. But it took me a few more weeks of being in the hospital and on a lot of very strange medications that made my face feel like a mask and things like that. And I couldn't speak properly. It took about another year to get over all of that. But touch wood, all I can say is that's been since, God, I'm now 51, and that was in my early 20s. That's when that happened, and I've been fine ever since. But it's taken me a lot of years and a lot of time, and I would say I've been fully recovered probably since my mid to late 30s. So for nearly 15 years, I would say I've been fully recovered. And then I told everybody about it when I published my book 6 years ago. I basically told people that, because no one knew, I was too ashamed to talk about it. And that's why I can now stand and say that I've waited all these years. I now feel I have all the tools in the toolbox up here. I've been fine ever since. Now I can stand with confidence to say, yeah, I'm absolutely fine. And that's why I said at the beginning, you know, everybody's different, and I feel I'm fully recovered. I mean, God forbid, I don't know what's coming in the future, but so far so good. And I'm very, very happy, and very happy with the way things are now. So that's it in a nutshell. So hope that gives some hope to others that trust me when I say it's hard, but it's so worth it. You just need to believe that you are worth that recovery.
Tina, people who know me know that I have a lot of words a lot of the time, and I feel a bit lost for them now, because at the moment right now I'm just experiencing quite a lot of emotion from hearing your story. So thank you so much for sharing that. It's just incredible. Incredible. And I tell you the word that and I don't even particularly like this word, to be honest. I think it's overused.
Sorry, I don't want you to get upset.
No, I'm fine with that. It's of course it's just such a powerful story, isn't it? And so I'm so humbled that you're sharing that with me in my little room today, and with the people that are listening today. And the word that keeps coming into my mind, and like I said, I don't particularly like this word, and I think it's overused and misunderstood a lot, but it's resilience. I mean, God, you know, what do you understand about what was it that kept you going through all of that? Like, how do you make sense of that? Like, what does that look like to you?
I just think, because I mean, that is actually an interesting question, because there's a lady called Emma J. Bell who's written a book called 9 Secrets to Thriving. And I was involved in that. And it's, so basically she's got 50 people from across the world who've experienced something, whether it be my story or involved in a terrorist attack, whatever it's been. She's taken out and analysed what it is, and she's come up with these 9 secrets. And with my story, like she's talked about it and heard it and read it, and she's extrapolated that it's this intrinsic belief that you can, it's this inner self-awareness that ultimately is there. And once you truly believe in it, you can turn things about, you know, use that grit and determination from the very negative way, which was easy for me to do. It's hard to turn it positive, but really take ownership, and also managing the expectations of my ability in my life. You know, I think I had too many expectations on myself, and understanding that really made a difference. Like when I said I did bibliotherapy with all them books, that's pretty much what it was. It was my own way of therapy after therapy. You know, once I've left the unit and had all my therapy, I continued that learning process.
Absolutely.
And it's important it was important for me to understand what had gone wrong, why. That's not, I couldn't figure out why I had done that. Like, why did my brain want to kill me? Like, it's in my body, why did it do that? And it just bothered me, because ultimately I thought, why does my own brain think I'm so worthless? You know, and why? So why? So this is why I kept humming.
And what's your answer to that, Tina, out of interest? What do you now understand about that? Because I think a lot of people will be hanging like, well, my brain's doing that to me. My brain says I'm useless. My brain says that I don't deserve to do this. My brain says I'm useless and crap and awful. And what's your answer to that?
Well, I think that's, unfortunately, that is the nature of the beast, isn't it? It's all about confidence and ultimately mental illness, because I was mentally unwell, right? So your brain's not functioning correctly, and the more I became malnourished, the more my brain was rigid and not thinking correctly, and my cognitions were all off, and I believed and believed and believed.
Yes.
So the more I told myself I was fucking, you know, excuse the language, I was just this useless piece of shit. You know, this is, if you tell yourself that enough, you're going to believe it.
Absolutely.
If someone was telling me that every day, I would, well, for one, I wouldn't tolerate it. I would have punched them in the nose by now. But when you're telling yourself it, no one's there to tell you otherwise, because you don't share that thought, right?
Yeah.
So no one was telling me, Tina, you're a nice person, you're a kind, gentle, caring person. All I thought was, Tina, you're effing useless, you can't do this right, you're stupid, you're thick, you're ugly, you've got an ugly face, you know, look at you, your hair's a man cave, you know, you're poor, people think you smell like, so all these things and all my societal things and situational things all added in and mounted up. And the more people laughed at me when I was clinking past them with the bottles, the more it affected my inner confidence. I became more and more head down, self-esteem was gone. So, you know, I had been okay. I remembered it back when I was a kid. I remembered I used to be happy and laughing. So when I tried to kind of almost lose all that weight and regress back to that happy days, you know, as a child, where you were cared for and happy and didn't have these woes, then that all ultimately made sense to me. I thought, Christ, it all makes sense. I know, I understand, and that's never going to happen. You know, I'm never going to get back to that. Yeah. So I need to understand me now. I need to focus on what I need to do, who I am. I'm not a horrible person. I've never hurt anybody in my life, you know, and I've hurt myself more than ever. So it was just, I was managing my own expectations, I suppose, and really, really working hard to keep that hammered in my head every day, instead of allowing that negative thoughts to keep coming in. And I think the more I did it every single day, the more I started to believe it slowly. I started to think, well, maybe I've managed this, maybe you can manage that, you know. So it's just this thing. It's not, I don't think, you know, I don't have all the answers, Mary. That's what I said at the beginning too. What works for me won't work for everybody. You know, but it worked for me. So, but it took bloody years.
Absolutely. But you know what I'm really hearing when you're talking, Tina, and obviously I'm hearing you through the filter of my own thinking and trying to make sense of everything you're saying. What I'm hearing is you gave yourself compassion and a chance to understand.
Absolutely.
You know,
compassion. Yeah.
You know, you were kind. You went to the library. You allowed yourself to feed yourself with knowledge, and understand what happened to you and make sense of it, but in a compassionate, sort of curious way, rather than a kind of what the hell's wrong with you kind of way.
Yes.
And you started to make some sense of it. You started to put the pieces of the puzzle together and go, of course I responded like that. It's completely understandable that I reverted to that, because I was trying actually to keep myself feel safe.
Exactly. And once you know that, it makes sense that you're not abnormal. Of course it's normal to feel, you know, out of control and all these things if you're in that situation. But because I didn't have any help or support, but thank God nowadays in schools and things, and for people, they have, thankfully, much more support available. I know it's not ideal, but there is someone they can talk to in confidence, which is great, I hope.
And Tina, what would you say to somebody who's sitting here listening today? I don't know where that person is, in their room or in their flat, or listening on their headphones as they're walking, and they're thinking, well, that's great for you, Tina, but for me, that's not possible. For me, I'm not, you know, I won't. I've tried before and it won't work. I've tried everything, and for me, this is just the way it is for me. What would you say directly to those people?
Well, I used to think the same way. That's exactly the way I used to think. I never believed for 1 minute I would be alive, let alone be married and have raised 4 amazing children and have a job and write a book and, you know, just have amazing friends. I would never, like that's what I said, I would never have believed that. But that one doctor gave me that wee grain of hope, because she knew, she's seen all these tens of thousands of people before me, you know, with all sorts of illnesses and conditions. And she knew. And I think her knowing and believing that, you have to understand that you might not see it because you're in it. And when you're in it, it's hard to see, right? It's like when they say you can't see the wood for the trees. It's so true, because you're, you know, fog bound or snowbound, whatever I often refer to, because no one had said to me, Tina, you know what, this is all nonsense. You don't need that shit. Come with me. You've got a great life. You can have. No one came and told me that. It was this one person after all that trauma and all that pain. So if someone is sitting there right now, I know it's hard. But like I said, my journey is different from your journey. However, our pain is the same. I've been in that emotional pain and pit and despair where I thought the only solution was to never be here again. And I am so, so thankful. Thank bloody whatever happened, I don't know, that I did not, you know, do that. I didn't end on those days. I am here. And although we're in a pandemic and things are bloody hard, they are hard. I'm still glad I'm here. Do you know what I mean? Life is okay. And please know that you can get through this. And I know it's hard. It's not easy. Or else everybody would be there would be no psychiatric units. There'd be no one. If it was easy, we'd all be fine. But it's hard. And it's about trusting that in you, that everybody is so worthy of recovery of some sort, whatever that may look like, and have happiness in their life, or at least being content. And I think finding contentness is the key for me. Yeah. Finally realizing, you know what, you are enough exactly the way you are. It doesn't matter. It's nothing to do with your happiness, is not predicated on a frigging scale or a number or a calorie or any of that bullshit bollocks. It's just you are happy as you are, and it's finding that. It shouldn't be predicated on any of those other fake aspects. So please don't think I'm being flippant when I say that. I know, because I've done it.
I don't think anyone will think you're being flippant, Tina. I don't think you could be accused of being flippant. I mean, I've got all these questions. I don't even, and just let me just review them. Is there anything that I want to ask you that you've said so much and you've shared so openly? I guess here's my maybe my, let me have a look at the time. I don't even know what time it is. Oh, beautiful. Okay. If Tina, what was the one thing that you wish you'd known at the start? You know, that when you were on that beach in Italy, you know, what do you wish you'd known then that you know now?
I wish I'd known that there was, well, I didn't know how unwell I was, but I think I wish I'd known I was loved. I wish I'd known that, you know, if I had talked to someone, somebody would have supported me. And I think that's the two things, because I think love and support is literally priceless. Like, without the love of my husband, you know, over all these years, and because he stuck by me when I became unwell and with psychosis, and I was shit scared he would run for the hills as soon as he thought, oh my God, my new girlfriend, she's now in a psychiatric ward, you know, this is going through my head. But he came and visited me every single day, sometimes twice a day. And he was maybe the only person to visit me, which was fine. But his love, his unconditional love, and it's worked both ways over the years, has really, really made a massive difference. So I think, and I was loved, but I didn't feel it. I didn't know it, you know. And I think then if I had known that and felt it, I don't think I would have been in the position I was in. So if I'd known that and the support, when I was able to get support, I might have not ended up down that rabbit hole either, unfortunately. So they are two big things for me. Yeah.
And I love that love is a thing that you wish that you'd felt and known, because ultimately that's the thing, isn't it? You know, love for ourselves and connecting and loving each other. Like what I've heard in your story, amongst many other things, which I'll be thinking of for the rest of the day and week, I should think, is those moments. It's like those moments, the connection. You heard that there was a connection when you heard that lady cry. There was a connection when you listened to that psychiatrist, and who knew that you were going to come through this, didn't hope for it, but knew you could come through it, you know, and saw that in you. And there's just these moments of connection with other humans.
Yeah, exactly.
that saved you, and I love that. I love that. Oh, Tina, I honestly could talk to you all day, and maybe we could do another conversation, because I imagine also that when our listeners hear this, they will have, as I do, things that they want to ask and say, and maybe we could set up some sort of
of course
scenario whereby you can talk to them. Let's see. But for now, Tina, is there anything else you want to say before we finish this recorded conversation?
Yeah, just please, honestly, if I can get through that, if I can get here today, and I know everybody's situation is different, and I know we've all got different experiences and support, I believe anybody can get to this point as well, because it's humanly possible. You just have to believe that this is within you. And there's a quote, Emerson, I wrote it in my book if I had it, and it's about when you see what what you have in you, it's amazing, but it's not until you really see it that it's there. It's one of the, you are everything. You are your world, and you have everything in you that you need. So
that is so true.
Believing in that is believing in that. And I think that's one of the most important messages, I think, for me, to impart on anybody, if they take anything away from this, is that you have your incredible inside, and just have to believe in that you can do this, because it is possible.
There's that poem, I think it's Rumi, who says you are not a drop in the ocean, you are the entire ocean in a drop.
Oh, no, it's true. That's a good one too. My problem, Mary, I can never remember them. I remember a few words of them, and then think, oh God damn.
Oh, thank you, Tina, so much from the bottom of my heart for sharing this with us all. And we will, I'm sure, be back asking you to connect with us again in the future. Thank you so much, Tina.
My pleasure, Mary. Thanks.